Hello, this is Guy Wallace. The following is part one of a three-part audio podcast series created by Google's Notebook LM, based on a document from my ISPI Presidential Initiative to Clarify HPT, Human Performance Technology, a society-wide effort from 2002 through 2004. That effort unfortunately failed in its implementation, from my perspective due to organizational politics, in that the paid leadership of ISPI at the time was resistant during the effort to conduct Stage 1 analysis and design, and then, to put it in polite terms, under-support it in the Stage 2 implementation efforts. A recent series of conversations I've had with Josh Cavalier in late 2025 and early 2026 about his efforts to build an open source AI skill set for performance consultants to use end-to-end in their efforts, and his agreement that performance improvement, or human performance improvement, requires a collaborative effort across many disciplines. That has given me hope that what the late Geary Rummler and I envisioned and agreed to work toward back in 2002 may finally be realized. My intent on starting the presidential initiative to clarify HPT over 2 presidential terms before I became president of ISPI was to see the concept of Geary's, that was technology domains can be used to define human performance technology. He had posed that in an ISPI journal article way back in 1983. I'd like to see that brought to life. Thanks to ISPI presidents Judy Hale and Jim Hill, who allowed me to start this effort during their presidential terms before I took the reins. It was a multi-year effort and collaborative with the entire society. As the documentation is now housed on a website I created a number of years ago to ensure that the outputs produced were not shelved, buried, or lost, because, as they say, hope springs eternal. Again, this is part one of 3 parts of audio podcasts and videos to share the thinking and outputs produced over 20 years ago, in the hopes that what open source AI skill set Josh Cavalier brings to the performance improvement consulting community bears fruit and brings value for all who use it.
Have you ever worked in an industry, or maybe just on a specific team, that suffered from a massive identity crisis?
Oh, I think we all have at some point.
Right. You know the feeling. It's that awkward situation where everybody shows up to work, everybody gets paid, but if you actually ask the group, hey, what is it that we do here exactly, you get 10 completely different answers.
Definitely. Think about newer job titles popping up right now, like prompt engineer or agile scrum master.
Yes, exactly. Nobody can seem to agree on the actual boundaries of those jobs. Does the prompt engineer report to the software developers, or do they sit with the marketing and content teams?
It's vague.
It is. And when an entire profession cannot define its own borders, it creates a lot of internal friction. Today, we are looking at a fascinating set of sources that tackle this exact problem.
It's a really great time capsule.
It really is. We are going back to a document from July 2002 featuring 2 major figures in the world of performance improvement, Guy W. Wallace and Geary A. Rummler.
And the reason we're diving into this is because it provides a phenomenal window into organizational psychology.
Yeah, the core mission of this deep dive is to explore how to solve an organizational identity crisis.
Precisely. Because whether you are a manager trying to unify a fractured team, a student entering a vaguely defined industry, or an entrepreneur trying to explain your startup's value to investors, understanding how to define your value proposition is absolutely crucial.
It's make or break.
It is. We are going to look at how redefining an industry by its objectives and technologies, rather than rigid definitions, can literally save an organization from irrelevance.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the stakes in this 2002 document are surprisingly high, and the frustration radiating from the text is just very real.
You can practically feel it jumping off the page.
You really can. We start with Guy W. Wallace. At the time, he is the president-elect of the International Society for Performance Improvement, or ISPI.
And he's a veteran there.
Right. He has been a member of this organization for 22 years, 2.5 decades. And he writes this piece basically confessing that after all that time, he still does not actually know what their field, human performance technology, or HPT, really includes.
It's a profound moment of professional vulnerability.
Yeah.
Here is the leader of an international society admitting that the core terminology of their profession is entirely ambiguous. Wallace points out that the older version of their name focused heavily on instruction, but he is trying to figure out what the other non-instructional components actually are.
Because he's looking at his own organization and asking, what is inside our box and what is outside?
He understands the landscape has shifted underneath their feet, and they are facing a very real existential threat.
He points out that they are operating in this massive, chaotic, big tent marketplace of improvement. There are endless conferences, newsletters, journals, websites.
Everyone is competing for the same attention.
And the same corporate training dollars. So Wallace is asking a very practical marketing question. How do we help prospects make an informed decision to spend their money and time with us?
They need a clear value proposition.
Right. They need literature that enthusiastically proclaims, come to ISPI and learn X, Y, and Z.
But he immediately hits a wall, though. He notes that over 85% of their members are in the instruction business.
Basically, corporate training and education.
Exactly. But he asks, what else can they emphatically proclaim to have value? What else actually affects human performance in the workplace?
So there's a long list.
It is. He lists all these other disciplines that naturally bleed into their world. Things like quality, finance, organizational development, ergonomics, marketing, industrial psychology, and management sciences.
And it is a super relatable dilemma. Because if they don't include those other things, if they don't clarify what else is in their specific box, their pitch is incredibly weak.
It's almost funny how he frames it.
Wallace actually jokes about it. He says without clarity, their pitch is basically, come to ISPI and learn about performance-based instruction and some other worthy non-instructional stuff.
You can almost hear him sighing through the page.
Yeah, no one is buying a ticket to a conference for other worthy stuff.
And the economic context matters heavily here, too. He mentions these trying economic times, referring to the climate in 2002 following the dot-com bubble burst.
Oh, right. Budgets were tight.
Very tight. He notes that a compelling value proposition is necessary just to survive, let alone thrive, which leads him to a rather radical suggestion.
The Danny Langdon quote.
Yes. He paraphrases his colleague, Danny Langdon, who essentially said, get the H out.
To get the H out, meaning they want to drop the word human entirely and just market themselves as experts in performance technology.
That was the idea.
But doesn't that just make it broader and even more vague? I feel like that is moving in the absolute wrong direction.
This raises an important question, and it is the exact paradox they were wrestling with. How often do we define our own skills or our organization so vaguely that we completely lose our competitive edge?
It happens all the time.
Wallace is staring down the barrel of irrelevance because his organization cannot agree on a definition, and he's willing to entertain throwing out part of their own name just to find some clarity.
Which perfectly sets the stage for the second part of our source document, written by Geary Rummler.
The 1983 time capsule.
Exactly. Rummler reads Wallace's concerns, and he mentions that he just returned from the 2002 ISPI conference where people were literally complaining, we have an identity crisis, and we can't do anything until we identify what HPT is.
And Rummler's reaction is basically, I already solved this 19 years ago.
It is the ultimate per my previous email moment, but spanning 2 entire decades.
It really is.
He digs up an article he wrote for their journal back in October 1983 titled Technology Domains and NSPI.
And to clarify for you listening, NSPI stands for the National Society for Performance and Instruction. That was the former name of the organization before they changed it to ISPI.
His insight into why they are stuck in this definition quagmire is just a brilliant observation of office politics.
It's human ego at its finest. Rummler points out that the organization has always had this mindset that it either was the field or represented the field.
Right.
And when you have that mindset, you feel this constant heavy pressure to legally define the boundaries of the profession. But Rummler says they have never accomplished that, and they never will.
Because if they actually drew a hard line and defined the field, it would automatically mean some of the organization's luminaries would suddenly be defined as being outside the field?
Exactly. The big names, the founders, the popular keynote speakers. You cannot define the borders of your country if it means accidentally exiling your most famous citizens.
So true.
So instead of making tough choices, they consciously chose a vague, confusing identity. It is organizational paralysis driven entirely by a desire not to offend anyone.
I remember working at a tech startup a few years ago where half the room thought we were a data analytics company, and the other half firmly believed we were a creative marketing agency.
That sounds chaotic.
We literally spent more time arguing over the wording of our LinkedIn bios than we did actually building the product. It is paralyzing. But Rummler's 1983 paper offers a way out.
It does.
He mentions that the origin of this paper came from a 1982 conference presentation where he had sharply criticized the organization.
He says his professional credo is, put up or shut up.
I love that.
Since he didn't want to shut up and stop criticizing their lack of direction, he felt compelled to put up and actually offer a substantive recommendation.
He wasn't just going to complain from the sidelines.
No, he's going to build a structural framework.
And his framework completely bypasses the need to define the field altogether. He offers a very elegant two-step solution.
What's the first step?
Step 1, agree on an objective. He uses the example, improve performance or effectiveness of individuals. You just plant a flag and say, this is the outcome we care about.
Keep it focused on the goal.
Right. And step 2, identify the technologies that contribute to that objective, and then just embrace all of them. You don't need a rigid definition. You just say, our goal is improving performance, and we welcome any tool or framework that helps us get there.
It completely shifts the posture of the organization from being exclusive to being inclusive.
Yeah, totally.
They stop acting like bouncers at a club, checking credentials, and start acting like a massive library of solutions.
Oh, hang on. If you just drop the boundaries and welcome literally any technology that claims to improve performance, doesn't that create absolute chaos?
You'd think so.
How do they avoid turning into a giant dumping ground for every passing corporate fad?
That is the exact trap he anticipated. Enter what Rummler calls the snake oil test.
The snake oil test.
Yes. If you are going to be an inclusive organization that welcomes any technology, you must establish strict, empirical criteria to differentiate between a legitimate change methodology and pure snake oil.
You need hard proof that the intervention actually works.
Exactly. But, as he notes, developing scientific criteria for what works is a piece of cake compared to the political nightmare of defining a professional field based on egos.
So the document has these incredibly detailed 1983 diagrams to back all of this up. Walk me through figure 1. How does Rummler actually visualize this entire concept of performance?
He breaks down the chaotic world of human labor into a wonderfully reductionist model. Imagine a simple diagram representing an individual worker.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Rummler says if your ultimate objective is improved performance, there are really only 3 major variables or levers that you can manipulate.
Just 3.
Just 3. The first lever is changes in the individual's repertoire.
Repertoire.
This is the internal stuff. This is where you use instruction, training, or education to literally change what the person knows or is capable of doing.
Like learning a new skill.
Right. Think of a salesperson who doesn't know the features of a new product. You train them. You change their internal repertoire.
It's surprisingly simple when you break it down like that. What is the second lever?
The second lever is support of the individual in the work environment. This is entirely external. These are your job aids.
Like a checklist on the wall.
A checklist, a new software tool, or a reference manual. You aren't trying to change the person's brain or have them memorize new facts. You are giving them an external tool to make the performance easier.
That makes sense.
Going back to the salesperson, this would be giving them a better CRM software so they don't have to memorize client phone numbers.
And the third lever?
The third lever is changes in the work or performance environment itself. This is the broad systemic ecosystem.
Like the company culture or rules?
Yes, it includes clarifying expectations so people actually know what they're supposed to be doing.
Right.
It includes the consequences and feedback they receive.
Oh, I see.
Are they incentivized to sell the new product? Or does their commission structure still reward selling the old one? It's about ensuring they actually have the resources to do the job.
You're really just left with 3 buckets to fix any work problem. You are either training the person, giving them a tool, or fixing the environment around them.
Precisely. And he follows this up with figure 2, which maps out the universal change process.
Right, the 5 steps.
He argues that it doesn't matter which of those 3 levers you are pulling, the basic steps of intervention are always the same 5-step linear progression.
First, the needs are analyzed.
Second, an intervention is selected.
Third, the intervention is designed and developed. And that is where you decide if you are changing their repertoire, supporting their behavior, or changing the environment.
Fourth, the intervention is implemented.
And fifth, the intervention is evaluated.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, You can see why Rummler felt he had solved the identity crisis 19 years prior.
It makes perfect sense now.
This framework is incredibly liberating. It takes all the pressure off of a specific job title. You don't have to agonize over whether you are an instructional designer or a human performance technologist.
You just look at the board and ask, which of these 3 levers am I pulling right now, and where am I in the 5-step change process?
It creates a shared, universal language. Suddenly, the person doing financial compensation modeling and the person designing a new, higher training module realize they're both working on the exact same universal change process.
Just pulling different levers for the exact same ultimate objective.
That is how you build a cohesive, aligned organization.
So he builds this matrix, and he introduces 4 primary technology domains. But before we get into how they connect to the broader research, what actually are these 4 domains in plain English?
They map directly to his universal change process. The first is needs analysis,
Which is essentially the investigative work of figuring out what is actually broken in the organization.
Yes. The second is instructional design and development, which is the craft of creating the training materials and curriculum.
Okay, got it.
The third is performance engineering. This is a bit broader. This is the practice of redesigning the actual workspace, the tools, the incentive structures, and the management systems to remove friction.
And the 4th?
The fourth domain is simply evaluation, which is the data science of measuring whether any of the things you just did actually improved performance.
Okay, so he takes those 4 domains, and what makes his matrix so powerful, specifically in figures 3, 4, 5, and 6 of the text, is how he connects these very practical corporate tasks to abstract academic research areas.
It bridges the gap.
He lists subjects like learning theory, physiology, behavior modification, organization behavior, and computer science, and he shows the cross-pollination.
He gives a fantastic example in the text regarding left brain, right brain research. He takes something entirely abstract, neurological research on learner physiology, and draws a direct, unbroken line to a practical business outcome.
How does he connect them?
He shows how learner physiology impacts learning theory, and learning theory directly impacts the instructional design and development technology domain, which is what we use to change the repertoire of the individual worker.
Here's where it gets really interesting for anyone leading a team today. Rummler explains exactly why he built this massive matrix. It wasn't just an academic exercise to look smart.
No, it was a practical tool.
He intended it as a conceptual map, a literal guide to the territory. It is for newcomers trying to understand the field. But most importantly, he explicitly says it is for managers of training who have come to their responsibilities with no idea of the disciplines or technologies they are supposed to manage.
Imagine being promoted to head of a department at a modern software company. You look around and you have instructional designers, UX researchers, agile coaches, and compensation analysts.
You might have absolutely no idea how all these different specialists fit together.
Exactly. Rummler's matrix is a lifeline. It allows a manager to look at a grid and say, I see. My instructional designers are relying on this learning theory research, and my performance engineers are relying on this behavior modification research, and they are all feeding into this specific step of our universal change process.
It turns absolute chaos into a visible, managed system.
It really does.
Speaking of chaos, if you get this wrong in a typical corporate office, maybe you lose some money or waste a fiscal quarter chasing a bad management fad.
Sure.
But there is an advertisement buried in the middle of this journal that shows exactly what happens when the stakes are literally life and death. Right between Rummler's diagrams, there's a full-page ad for a conference taking place in August 2002 in Orlando, Florida.
The Conti advertisement.
Yes.
Conti stands for the Conference on Nuclear Training and Education.
Yeah.
At first glance, reading through this theoretical journal, it feels almost like a printing error, just a random ad placed to fill space.
But when you look closer, the connection to everything Wallace and Rummler are talking about becomes incredibly stark. Completely.
The theme of this nuclear conference is literally taking human performance to the next level. The program tracks listed in the ad include leadership for performance improvement, the human equation, and optimizing human performance.
They are using the exact same corporate vocabulary that ISPI is having an identity crisis over, but they are applying it to nuclear reactors.
Look at who is sponsoring this conference. You have the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, you have the Nuclear Energy Institute, the American Nuclear Society, and major global energy corporations.
And who are they inviting?
Performance technologists, training managers, human factors practitioners, and instructional technologists. They are calling out to the exact same professionals that Wallace and Rummler are writing for.
This is such a high-stakes application of everything we've been discussing. We have been talking about performance improvement and instructional technology as if they are these dry, theoretical HR concepts that only matter in boardrooms.
But this ad reminds you that these frameworks are the exact same tools used to operate nuclear power plants safely. When the stakes are quite literally nuclear, you cannot rely on a vague definition of your job.
And you absolutely cannot rely on snake oil.
Definitely not. When you are managing a global nuclear workforce to achieve and maintain outstanding performance, as the ad says, you need Rummler's matrix. You need to know exactly which lever you are pulling.
Because if a technician makes a mistake on the reactor floor, you need to know why.
Right. Is it a failure in their internal repertoire that requires immediate retraining? Is it a failure in their external job aids, like a poorly designed control panel? Or is it a systemic failure in the environment's feedback systems?
In the nuclear industry, getting that diagnosis wrong has catastrophic consequences.
The rigorous definition of these performance technologies is completely non-negotiable.
So what does this all mean? When we zoom out and look at this entire 2002 time capsule, from Wallace's existential dread about his organization's name to Rummler's structural genius and that jarring nuclear advertisement, the core takeaway is incredibly powerful.
It's a lesson for any industry.
When you or your organization are faced with an identity crisis, you have to stop fighting over restrictive definitions. Drawing lines in the sand only serves to exclude people and protect fragile egos.
Instead, you need to define your ultimate overarching objective. Then, map out every single technology, tool, and discipline that genuinely helps you reach that objective and become a holistic integrator of all those solutions.
Whether you are managing a fractured corporate team, starting a new business in a saturated market, or even just sitting in an interview trying to explain your own eclectic resume, this framework is invaluable.
Be the calm voice in the room that says, here's our objective, and here are the specific levers we can pull to achieve it.
If you can shift the focus from what is our title to what is our universal process for change, you become an indispensable asset to any operation.
It is about putting up instead of shutting up.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over on your own. We spent this time exploring how entire industries struggle with their identity and rely on these matrices to map their value. But what if you applied this to yourself?
A personal Rummler matrix.
Exactly. If you had to draw up a Rummler matrix for your own personal career right now, what is the ultimate objective you're trying to achieve? And perhaps more importantly, what are the specific technologies or concrete skills you need to claim to prove you aren't just selling snake oil? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of performance. Keep pulling those levers, keep questioning your objectives, and we will catch you next time.